Back off, man. I'm a scientist. So goes the famous Bill Murray line from the 1984 blockbuster movie Ghostbusters. But is it more than a joke? Do scientists actually have a leg up in the eternal quest for truth? And how does science do in a head to head match with religion? And specifically, who wins in the contest between science and Mormonism? That's the answer we're after tonight, here on Mormonism Live. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. This is Radio Free Mormon here, sans Bill Reel. If you thought it was a little bit rough on the cold open, it might be attributable to the fact that I'm the Lone Ranger tonight. As far as hosts of the show go, Bill is enjoying, I hope, a much-deserved, I know, vacation at points unknown, and he left me in charge. So here I am. Fortunately for me, and fortunately for you, there's a guest who's been scheduled for quite a while to come on the show and talk about the subject of science and Mormonism. And I'm referring to my new and good friend, Dwayne Anderson. Dwayne, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to see you.
I'm glad to see you too, RFM.
So are you a scientist?
Professionally, I was really an engineer. My background is physics, so that's science. And a lot of what I did as an engineer, I would characterize as science, though certainly not leading edge science.
Yes. Well, I want to talk about a book that you wrote. Did it come out around more than 30 years ago now, is it?
It's not quite that old. I think it came out in 2020.
2020? You mean 5 years ago?
I'm sorry, 2000.
Okay, thank you.
Time flies.
Oh, boy. Time has really slowed up for me.
Yeah.
But 5 years, right. So here's the book, right? Now I'm going to put it on the screen so we can all see it. Yeah, there it is. And it's called Farewell to Eden. This is a book that I had heard of at the time it came out. I think it made some waves. I mean, at the time, I'm still a very faithful member of the church, still trying to find some way to rationalize, justify, legitimize my faith in Mormonism. I don't think I actually got your book, though I don't have a photographic memory. So can you tell us about this book, Farewell to Eden? And the subtitle is Coming to Terms with Mormonism and Science. That sounds like what we're talking about tonight, Dwayne. Tell us about your book and how it came to be written.
Well, I'll tell you first how I picked that title, because I was a long-term member of the church. And for me, Mormonism was Eden. And finding out some things about Mormonism meant saying farewell to Eden. So I was born to Mormon parents. I lived in Kent, Washington for most of my formative years.
Me too.
Yeah. And I can remember growing up being totally immersed in everything Mormonism. Like, we would have, back then we had a church all day Sunday. So you would go in for priesthood meeting, and then you'd come home from priesthood meeting and get the wife and kids and go back for Sunday school. And then you'd come home, have lunch, and then go back for sacrament meeting. And in the evening, there might be a fireside. Sunday was an all-day affair. Mm-hmm. Monday was family home evening. Tuesday was primary. Wednesday was mutual improvement. It was like really immersed. And
it was your whole life. It's still supposed to be, but then it was reflected in the meeting schedule.
Yeah, so that was the world I grew up in, and I went on a mission after I graduated from high school. I went to British Columbia in 1974.
So you went from Western Washington to British Columbia.
Yeah,
that's like your backyard.
Yeah, I knew when it was raining at home
because it was raining there.
It was raining there. Yeah. So served a 2-year mission in British Columbia, came home and went straight into BYU. And I chose as my major was physics. I actually come from a family of, on my dad's side, of pretty prominent physicists and scientists. And in fact, the book, when I wrote it, I dedicated it to my uncle Marlowe. His name is Dwayne Marlowe Anderson. And he was a very prominent scientist in the U.S. He also went to BYU. And he was involved in science all over the world. He was involved in the Viking missions to Mars. He helped design the mass spectrometer for that mission. And
this is your dad or your granddad?
This is my uncle, my dad's brother.
Your uncle. Wow.
Yeah. And then my dad's other brother was a professor of physics at San Jose.
Okay. So what does your dad do? Sells vacuums?
My dad has a degree in physics from BYU.
There you go.
And so I kind of was raised in this, immersed in this soup of Mormonism and science, but also my uncle Marlowe, early on in his life, left the Mormon Church. He went on a mission. I think he went on a mission. Yeah, he went on a mission. But he left the church after he got off of his mission. And like I said, he's an extremely prominent scientist, known nationally. If you Google Dwayne Marlowe Anderson, there's literally hundreds of his papers that are online. And his specialty was frozen soils, polar soils. So he was a geologist.
So can I ask you this now? This is fascinating to me because you've got a lot of scientists running around in this family, and they're all Mormons, correct? At this time when you're young?
Except for Marlowe, he left.
Oh, he's not a member even when you're young?
Even when I was young, he had left the Mormon Church. He left in his 20s. I think it was a little bit of a row at BYU, but I don't know.
So even with that in there, did any discussions take place around you or with you about the wonders of how Mormonism is the only religion that's actually scientific?
Yeah, now that's interesting because Marlowe was kind of held on the down and low. I knew about him, but my parents didn't really want me to know too much about him. I actually connected with Marlowe after I wrote my book because or not after I wrote my book, but slightly before I wrote my book. He saw some of my stuff online and he called me up and he said, "Hey, you're not Mormon anymore. I'm not Mormon. Let's get together." So I used to go up and visit with him in Hamilton, in Hamilton, Washington.
Hamilton, Washington? He lives way upriver in Hamilton?
Yeah, he's
hiding out from the law or something up there?
Well, he died, unfortunately, about 10 years ago. But yeah, he had a great place up there. I'd go up there and he'd drive me around in his pickup truck in the North Cascades and explain all the geology. But Marlowe was kind of, I don't know if it's fair to say he's like the dirty little secret, but he definitely, for me, it seemed that my parents didn't want me to know too much about him.
Well, let's put it this way, and I'll ask the question this way. Would you have had the relationship that you ended up developing with Marlowe if you hadn't gone the way you did and written the book you wrote?
I probably would not have ever connected with him again. No, it was because of he saw that I was ex-Mormon and he wanted to reach out to me. He was kind of a lonely man because you know what happens when people leave Mormonism, right? When you leave Mormonism,
get insanely happy and realize what life is all about.
Well, you lose a lot of your family. If your family is
the downside. Yes, I'm sorry. You're right.
If your family is Mormon, people stop coming to visit. People stop calling. You know, that happens. And I think there were some hard feelings there about him leaving. But anyway, my other uncle, he's still alive. He was a professor of physics at San Jose. And my dad passed away 6 years ago, but he was a physicist and he worked for Boeing. So I grew up in an environment where science was pretty important.
Yeah. And you ended up majoring in it? Did you major in physics?
Yeah, I did. I went to BYU after I got off my mission. I went to BYU in 76. and I majored in physics and minored in math. And I got married to we knew each other in high school. We weren't high school sweethearts because we didn't date in high school. But my wife and I knew each other quite well. We went to seminary together.
That's because you were good Mormons, right?
Yeah, we were good Mormons. I didn't swim in her social circle.
Got it. I didn't date in high school, but that's not because I was a good Mormon. It's because I was incredibly unattractive. Yeah,
well, I was scared of girls. I'm still scared of girls.
With good reason, by the way.
Yeah, I know. So anyway, Laura and I got married when we were at the end of our junior year. So, we were
at BYU.
At BYU, we were following the prophet's command. The prophet said, "Get off your mission, get married, and have kids right away." So that's exactly what we did. Yeah, that was back in the good old days when birth control was a sin. Mm-hmm. That was something that you needed to talk to your bishop about. Yeah. So anyway, we had our first child while we were still at BYU. We both graduated in 1980, and then I had a job in Arizona, and we went off.
So you get married when you're juniors, and I take it you graduate the following year when you're seniors, but you managed to have a child before you graduated.
Yeah.
Kudos to you.
We were doing exactly what the prophet said, because we were promised that if you did what the prophet said, it'd all work out.
Yep, and you will be blessed. And you're still together.
Yeah, and it did work out, but that was just really bad advice to get married and have a kid while you're still in college.
Did that cause trouble?
No, we worked it out. It worked for us.
Okay.
But that's just horrible advice to give to young people. I would never give that advice to young people, ever.
No, not unless you had a vested interest in bringing those children down from heaven so they can start paying their shekels at the tithing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, all right, so you get married, you have a child, and now you're still very faithful. You're going on all cylinders, I imagine, as a Mormon.
Yeah. In Phoenix, I was elders quorum president in the ward there. I was their elders quorum president there for several years, and then we moved up to Central Oregon. And as soon as we moved to Central Oregon, they called me to be elders quorum president there. And so I was very invested in the church, and I decided that I wanted to further my scriptural acumen. So I started reading the Old Testament cover to cover. I'd read all the other scriptures cover to cover many, many times.
Yes, we were talking about this earlier. 7 times for the New Testament, 7 times for the Book of Mormon, 7 or 8 times for the Doctrine and Covenants, but never once laid your hands on the Old Testament in a serious way.
Yeah, it was 17 times for the Book of Mormon.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to denigrate you.
Yeah, you're pulling me up short on that one.
I know. I stopped counting when I got to 20, but 17 is nice too.
Yeah. Well, it's frankly, it's a little humbling that I had to read it 17 times before I could figure it out.
Okay.
So anyway, I did start a deep dive into the Book of Mormon and into the Old Testament. So I started reading the Old Testament cover to cover, and then kind of simultaneously.
Around what year is this, and how old are you?
This would have been 1988.
1988.
Yeah.
So you're 30, 40?
Early 30s. I was born in 55.
Okay.
I'm 70.
So 88, right. Okay, so around 33. Got it.
Yeah, so I started reading. I wanted to make a map of the Book of Mormon lands. Sound familiar? Anybody ever try that before?
Better men have tried.
Yeah,
John Sorensen has done that a couple of times. He came up with a book called Mormon's Map, which looks nothing like anything you're going to find anywhere in the Americas, unless it's the Americas themselves.
Well, I'll tell you, I tried, and I found that the Book of Mormon geography is not self-consistent, and you.
Now wait a second. Hold it, Dwayne. You must have done your studies backward, because I have heard time and time again from Mormon apologists that the Book of Mormon, one of the many remarkable things about the Book of Mormon is its internal geographic consistency.
Yeah, I'm sure you have heard that, but I couldn't make it fit. And by the way, it's really easy to write a book and keep your geography consistent if you draw the map before you write the book. But that's not what happened, I don't
So
think.
you're saying it's not consistent. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're not trying to map it on the real world. You're just trying to make a map of it that's consistent with what the Book of Mormon has to say about its own lands and cities.
Yeah. Like the Book of Mormon will say this city was north of the narrow neck of land, and this one's south of it, and it gives you the number of days that it would take to walk. So my approach was I was just going to draw the map the way the Book of Mormon describes it, and then see if I could lay that map on a real map someplace and have things line up.
It would be a great first step.
Yeah, that seemed like the logical thing to do. And of course, if you really believe the Book of Mormon is true, then it should all work out, right? Because it should be truth, right? So I was working on that. And then at the same time, I was reading the Old Testament. And I came to a part of the Old Testament that I just couldn't go beyond. I had to talk to somebody about it. And that was in Numbers chapter 31, where
I hate that chapter.
Yeah, I do too.
It's the worst. Seriously, tell us what is Numbers 31?
Numbers 31 is when Moses is commanded to go and commit genocide, or Moses commands the Israelites to commit genocide. He says, go kill all the Midianites, kill all the men, all the women, all the children. And I think he said they could keep the animals as spoils of war, but I can't remember. And so anyway, I read that over and over, and I said, this is not right. This can't be. And
the coup de grace, you explained it to me on the phone, was that they don't actually kill everything. And the people come back and say, maybe this isn't such a good idea. And Moses gets really mad. And he says, no, God told you, kill every freaking man, woman, and child. And God said it. It means you do it. But by the way, we've got a special dispensation right now from God. And what was that special thing that they got to do?
Well, yeah, they brought the women and children back because they said we don't think it's right to kill the women and children. And Moses says, no, you got to kill the women and children, except you can keep the young girls if you want as wives. But the rest of them, you got to kill them, including all the little babies.
Wow.
So I looked at that and I thought, there's just no way to square this. You can't, this can't be true. So I went to my stake president and I asked my stake president, I said, how can this be true? And my stake president's, his answer was, we talked for quite a while, but the upshot of his answer was, well, if God said to do it, it's the right thing to do by definition. So
see, that pained me when you told me what your stake president said. And I went, no, he didn't say that, did he?
Well, what else is he going to say?
He could say, look, it's a stupid story. It's designed to show how mighty the God of Israel is, and he can beat up all the other gods who are in charge of the other nations.
Yeah.
He could say something like that, or at least try, something, anything other than God said it was okay. So what's your problem? Yeah.
Well, I mean, God said it was okay when Abraham was supposed to kill Isaac.
He's the one who gave the command. Presumably he sent the angel.
Yeah. And God said it was okay when Nephi was supposed to kill Laban. So I'm detecting the pattern here. Right?
And he ordered Nephi. Nephi wasn't an easy sell. God had to really lean on Nephi to get him to whack off Laban's head.
Yeah. Yeah. So that didn't work. That didn't work for me. I asked him if I could write to the general authorities, and he said, "Yeah," but and I think I did.
But I'm send your letter back to me.
I'm pretty sure I didn't get any reply back because general authorities really don't know their scriptures, let alone how to handle deep these kinds of moral issues. So anyway, at that point I said, okay, Mormonism can't be true. It was a pretty easy decision for me.
Based on Numbers 31.
Yeah.
Did not your stake president even think to say this is one of the things that isn't translated correctly?
Well, that was actually one of my first questions to him. I said, could this have been translated incorrectly? And,
yes. It's a lifeline. Grab it, stake president.
Yeah, but I think the story is in the Joseph Smith translation, just like it is in the regular Old Testament. So
well, I'm sure it is, but he didn't get around to everything.
Yeah, he didn't get around to the really important stuff.
He was a busy man.
Like genocide. I think he also forgot to change the stuff about slavery in the Old Testament too.
Right.
Yeah.
We're the new.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so all this happens, and you as a Mormon are knocked out of the church by an obscure chapter in the Old Testament. That's fascinating to me. I mean, obviously there's huge moral implications in this whole idea that the only moral inquiry that we need to make as Mormons is whether God told you to do something horrible.
Yeah, I guess you could say I left Mormonism because I had more faith in God than I did in Mormonism. And I did not believe God could be that bad.
Okay, so how about Laura? Is she on the same ship that you're sailing?
So, I went home and I told Laura that I didn't believe in the church anymore. And it was a big shock for her.
Yeah.
And we had to go through, some conversations and a lot of angst before we settled into a place that seemed like it was going to work. And that place was that I was going to go with her to church every Sunday. I put my foot down on tithing. I said, no more tithing. They're not getting another dime. But I would go to church with her every Sunday, and I would take the kids, her and the kids, and we'd go in as a family. And that I would, I'd keep up the appearances, but I said, I'm not going to go to priesthood meeting or Sunday school. And during sacrament meeting and the whole 3-hour block, I took books and read them. I read hundreds of books sitting in the Mormon church.
Wow. Sacrament meeting. So you only went to sacrament meeting, which is the worship service at the Mormon church for those who are not members of the church watching. And we actually have a number of those who do watch. Fascinated by Mormonism, though never a member. What was the best book you read that you remember reading when you should have been paying attention, but were not in your rebellious way?
It was probably No Man Knows My History.
Oh my gosh. I hope you put that in some kind of a brown paper cover.
No, I didn't. And when people would come up to me, I would sit on the couch in the foyer, and people would come up and say, "Hey, Dwayne, what you reading?" I'd show them the cover, and they usually just kind of walk away.
Do they have any idea? I mean, it is kind of the most famous bad book about Joseph Smith ever.
Yeah, it's Fawn Brody. I had grown up being told that she was like the devil's wife, and her book is, I think, amazing. She's actually absolutely a first-rate scholar, and she writes well. She organizes.
She really does write well, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's just
a lot of people are scholars, but man, she can really write well and engagingly, and I find that in such short supply.
Yeah, and so I felt bad for her just because of the way some of the Mormon apologists, who was it? Was it Nibley, I think, said some pretty unkind things towards her. And
well, yeah, he said, "No, ma'am, that's not history," was his rebuttal.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty unscholarly rebuttal. Yeah. Anyway, so
I don't remember what's in it so much, but I do remember having read it, and I remember the title of it.
Yeah, one of the things I found in reading my Mormon books is I have actually a pretty deep Mormon history. My great-great-great-grandmother was Melissa Lott, who was one of...
Oh, she has a family Bible, doesn't she?
Yeah, she is. She was...
Michelle Stone asked you to be on her show. She likes to talk about the Melissa Lott a lot.
Yeah, so she was married to my great-great-great-grandfather after Joseph Smith was killed, and so I knew about her. I knew about the family lore, though, was that she was sealed to Joseph Smith after he was shot, and I didn't learn that she actually was married to Smith before that, and also married as a young teenager. Not a young teenager, but I think she was a teenager. And lived with him like his wife. So anyway, I left the Mormon church in terms of not believing it anymore, not paying tithing, but I would still go with my wife and my kids.
Okay. How long did you keep doing that? By the way, for those in the live chat, which I'm not monitoring, I am cognizant of the fact that Michelle Stone is not doing her show anymore. So you missed your chance, Dwayne.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Her stake president is leaning on her.
Yeah.
And probably people higher up, although they don't want to let that out.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was the question?
The question was, how long did you keep doing this?
Oh, I did this until probably 2008. And I came.
Was that 20 years?
Yeah.
That's a long time.
That's a long time. Yeah. So anyway, we came home from church one day, and Laura looked at me, my wife, and she said, you don't need to go to church with me anymore. And by the way, I'm not going to church either. And so that initiated some interesting conversation. And
I'll bet. What knocked her out?
Well, I'll do a shout out to John Larson. Thank you, John. My wife.
John Larson.
Yeah, she found John Larson on the internet, and that was that.
Mormon Expressions.
Yeah. So
did you hear the one that I was on about bullseyes in the Book of Mormon back when I was an apologist?
No, I didn't.
Well,
I didn't listen to John Larson that much, actually, but my wife listened to him a lot. I actually have listened to a lot of his podcasts, but probably less than half.
Something about that, yeah, and I listened to a lot of them too, because John Larson, I know he had a merry crew on there with him on his panels and everything, but he just had a way and a manner and a gift of just cutting through a lot of the BS and saying things in sometimes a blunt way, but always a really clear and often insightful way.
Yeah. Well, I will say, just as a group, the people like yourself and John DeLynn, and so, people who are doing these podcasts are pretty smart people.
Well, thank you. Coming from a scientist, that means something. So, Dwayne, your wife says, I'm out of the church, and now that I'm not going anymore, you don't have to either.
Yeah.
I'm surprised she didn't make you keep going at least for another year while she didn't go. Oh, wait a second. Did I hear a feminine laugh there? Was that you, Dwayne, or someone else?
Yeah, Laura's sitting on the other side of the computer display.
She keeps a close eye on you, doesn't she?
She's shaking her feet.
I was talking to Laura before the show too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, we're both dancers from way back.
Yeah.
Dwayne. Okay, so now you've already written the book. The book came out in 2000, right? So you've already written the book and you're still going to church.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you end up writing this book?
Well, it was therapy for me. A lot of it was just, I needed to process it myself. It's like, the mathematical answer. If you're a mathematician, you might know the answer, but you need to write the proof out. And sometimes mathematical proofs can be just enormous. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, RFM. Can I be blunt? I guess I'll be blunt. Mormonism is just really stupid. And anybody can figure it out. But when you're born in it and you're raised in it and you're indoctrinated in it, and when you only get half the story and half the history and all these other doctrines are hidden, and they pull you in slowly, it can really mess with you. And it can be really, really hard to untangle that spider web and get out of it. And so that I'm not a smart person. I'm average IQ at best.
What was your GPA at BYU as a physics major?
I think it was 3.8.
Yeah. You're a smart person. Don't give me any of that crap. So
anyway, but proving the Book of Mormon isn't true that's about like proving that there's no Santa Claus or that his sleigh doesn't actually fly. It's pretty easy. But like I said, once that worm gets into your brain, it's really hard to pull that worm out. And
Yeah, when our entire world and social network and systems and our eternities are wrapped up in the idea that this has to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that for me, that's what I was doing is I felt like I had this need to just put together as rigorous a proof as I possibly knew how, just to convince myself that Satan hadn't climbed inside my brain and taken up residence.
Okay, so you end up writing this. Now, we're going to go through a few things, but this book is basically showing that, I almost said magic, Mormonism. Mormonism and science are like oil and water. They don't mix. In fact, science shows that Mormonism is not true at critical point after critical point. What was the reaction to this book?
Well, if you go on Amazon, you can look at the reviews, and there's the reviews are all either 0 or 4 or 5s. There's no 3s. So people come in, I think, already having made up their mind, and I think that's probably true on both sides. You know, the reality is I'm not a very good author. I probably don't write very well. I probably could have made a lot of points better. There are at least one technical mistake that I made. It's kind of a minor one to do with quantum physics, but you know, I think people come in, if they've left Mormonism, they come in looking for validation. And if they're still in Mormonism, they come in looking for a way to disregard it. You know,
was there any personal kind of pushback to you or your family about the publication of this book, Farewell to Eden?
Yeah, you know, one of the things I talked to Laura about before this podcast, and she made me promise, and I agree, is that I'm not going to talk about my siblings and my extended family, because it's going to be too hard to do that without them knowing I'm talking about them.
Oh, and that's fine. So there was some kind with negative pushback within your family?
I will just say, yeah, there was negative pushback within the family.
Yeah, that much we could have figured out from what you already said. So I understood you don't have to go into it. No problem. No pressure, okay?
My entire extended family is Mormon. All my siblings, my aunts and uncles, everybody.
Yeah. So you are the lone wolf. Now you're the black sheep.
I am the black sheep. I'm Marlowe's legacy.
And Laura, you took Laura with you. What do her parents have to say about that? Are they happy with you, Dwayne?
Well, Laura's parents are both dead. Her mother passed away about a year ago, and I was always on. Her name was Carolyn Walden, and she's one of the most amazing women I've ever known. She never let anything be. She never expressed any disappointment in me. She was always loving and kind towards me. So I can't say enough kind things about Carolyn Walden. And Laura's dad died about the time I wrote the book. And so we never really talked about religion at all, but he was also very accepting of me, but he was not a Mormon.
Oh, I see. Okay. I tell you what, let's go to this next one. Okay.
Sure.
Let's talk about what's in this book. This book is almost, if not over 400 pages long. There's a lot of topics covered. How can people get this book? Because we're only going to be able to go over a few basic things tonight. And then we're going to take a few phone calls, although I don't know how to work the phone system. So I'm going to be looking over here at the live chat. When we get to that point, I'm not looking at it now, so don't put your questions in there now. But if you want to put a question in there later on when I call for questions and I'll look at the live chat, I'm going to ask you put your questions in all caps so I can see it readily that that's a question. Or you will take 3 questions like we usually do, and then we'll call it a night. But in between now and then, let's talk about these basic things, these exciting things, I think, that you've culled from your manuscript.
Sure. Yeah. Well, right here, you can see that the church, as far as they're concerned, if you ask the church what's their stance on science, they'll say there's no conflict. There's no conflict between revealed truth and true science. And a lot of times you'll see that word true tossed in there. And that's the get out of jail free card, because they get to define what's true science. And true science is science that doesn't conflict with the church. Also, the church will say that all truth is revealed from God. And so I grew up believing, that every great scientific accomplishment was actually because of Mormonism. Yeah, I can't hear you, Radio Free Mormon. You're muted, I think.
Oh, thanks a lot. Using your scientific expertise against me, are you? Okay. No, that's exactly right, because I heard that over and over again. When science is brought up, all revelation, all inspiration, even the people who are not members of the church, even the scientists, and discoverers and explorers and all these people who did all these great things throughout history, they were all inspired by the Holy Ghost. So God gets credit for it in Mormonism, which means Mormonism takes credit for every single scientific discovery.
Right.
Especially
Exactly.
TV.
Yeah. Farnsworth and television. Yeah. Well, just so you know, a lot of people were involved in developing television. It wasn't just one man's invention. But,
dang it.
Yeah. And of course, the scriptures say that the wisdom of man is foolishness. So, if science is disagreeing with religion, well, that's because foolishness. And then for me, one of the most aggravating things is when they say the church has no official position. And that's aggravating because, first of all, there's no such thing as official position in the church. The church will teach things that it doesn't have public statements on. It'll have positions that it doesn't have official statements on. The thing that really matters to me is, what is the church teaching? What is it putting into other people's heads?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter to me whether it's being done through the PR department, which I think is the official way to do it. I don't know. I don't know that the Mormon Church has ever officially said how they set official positions. It's
all gotten quite complicated, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It used to be if the prophet said something when he's acting as a prophet, that's from God.
Yeah.
You can take it to the bank.
Yeah. I don't think you can do that anymore.
No, now it's very, very complicated. In fact, it's made so labyrinthine that it's actually impossible, even for the wisest among us, to discern.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
What is science, by the way, Dwayne?
So, when you say that word science, a lot of people have different things that come to their head. Some people might think it's the theories. Some people think it's the facts. I view science this way. I think science is founded on an epistemology. An epistemology, that's just a big word for saying, how do we know what's true? How do we know what we know? And then facts are observations, and then theories are things that explain the facts. And I think in any time you're talking about science and religion, it's important to know if you're talking about all three of these or just one or two of them.
Hmm. Right. Science, that does come from the Greek for knowledge, correct?
I think so. I don't know Greek, but I'll take
Gnosis. Science might be Latin. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
Everything's
know.
Greek to me, and if it's not, it's Latin. Okay, so what's the epistemology of science? I understand epistemology. It's a big word. Like you said, it means how it is we know what it is we know.
Yeah. Well, in science, we start off by saying that there's got to be some sort of objective and knowable external reality. We just make that assumption. Then we proceed by using empiricism, which is like, let's go out and do experiments and collect data, and let's get our telescope out and do observations. Rationalism is the idea that you can put all of this stuff together, your experiments and your observations, put them together using logic and construct theories which make the whole thing work. So a theory is kind of like a map that helps you understand how the facts come together.
Mm-hmm. Who's Mr. Lewis?
Mr. Lewis was my high school physics teacher. Really important man in my life. And he had a lot of great sayings, but his idea was always keep an open mind. So you're willing to look and entertain anything, but don't let your brain fall out. And you let your brain fall out when you forget to be skeptical. So skepticism is absolutely key to science. If you don't have skepticism, you don't have science. Scientists are just have razor sharp, blistering skepticism by design, because that's how you sort out what works and what doesn't.
I will tell you that if you're going to define skepticism in that way, I'm not saying it's an incorrect way, but it does make me think of lawyers too, because lawyers are very skeptical. And it comes out in this way. As soon as I'm talking with anybody or listening to anybody talk and somebody makes a certain claim that's universal, my mind will immediately start searching for exceptions.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any difference what the claim is or what it's about. It's just like I'm trained to do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll think of them, which would refute the claim, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't, but that's the training. Sometimes it's not easy being me.
Yeah, well, scientists are a lot like that. If somebody comes up to me with a theory and they say, here's my new theory, my first thought is, well, show me your data and tell me how to falsify your theory.
Falsify the theory, huh?
Yeah. If you can't tell me how to falsify your theory, then not good.
Nope, theory has to be falsifiable. Otherwise, it's junk. It's not worth anything, I think.
That's right. No, that in science, that's actually true. So like you will find some pushback and debate about that, but I think in general, the scientific community says, look, it's got to be falsifiable or it's not actually a scientific theory.
Okay.
There are some exceptions to that. So for example, you take a thing like string theory. One of the criticisms of string theory is that it's not falsifiable, but it might be falsifiable with better tech. And originally, Einstein's general theory of relativity made a lot of falsifiable claims, but we couldn't test them because we didn't have the tech. So sometimes there might be a theory that is falsifiable, but not in the moment because the tech does not exist. That makes sense?
Yeah, it sounds like the Book of Abraham to me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It wasn't falsifiable in the moment because they didn't have the tech yet to actually read it.
Yeah. So, I really with this slide here, I just wanted to emphasize that theories are a big deal in science. Sometimes the word theory gets tossed around kind of lightheartedly, imprecisely. But in science, a theory is a really big deal. And in fact, the things that we call theories today, 100 years ago would probably have been called laws. There's been kind of a movement away from the term laws towards theories just because we want to recognize that who are we to call it a law? It's our best guess. Maybe it'll change.
Do you think that quantum physics may have introduced some humility into the scientific community in that regard? Quantum mechanics?
It's definitely possible because quantum physics upended a lot of our thoughts in the scientific community about what's knowable and what's not knowable. And I say that technically that's true, but people will oftentimes take quantum physics and run with it in ways they shouldn't run. But quantum physics taught people some humility, I think. Sure.
Is there anything else about the slide you want to tell our audience, Dwayne?
Yeah, I guess I'll just hit it again. Theories have to be falsifiable. And the word falsifiable means that it's possible to construct an experiment that would falsify the theory if the theory was not true.
Right.
Okay. Now compare that, for example, to what you find in Mormonism, and we'll get there later too.
We don't know where the Book of Mormon took place.
Well, in the Book of Mormon, it's all about what can you do to prove that it is true. And the idea is that you can never prove that a theory is true because it might correctly predict 100 experiments, but who's to say that on the 101 experiment it fails? And this actually happened with Newton's laws. With Newton's laws, they correctly predicted every experiment for over 100 years, and then they failed to correctly predict the orbit of Mercury. And it wasn't by a big amount. It was by a small amount. I think it was 4 arc seconds, but it was wrong about the orbit of Mercury.
You said 4 arc seconds. What does that mean in human terms?
So there's 3,600 arc seconds in 1 degree.
So this is a really, really tiny amount.
Really, really tiny amount. But it was wrong, and it was a big enough amount that it was bigger than the experimental uncertainty. And so scientists knew that it was wrong. They just didn't know how to fix it. Well, general relativity fixed it. So I think it was kind of in conjunction with that around the early 1900s, scientists kind of started migrating away from using the word law and more towards theory, but it's not rigid, it's not fixed. Okay. But I have heard people say, oh, that's just a theory, it's not a law. And that's a nonsensical statement.
And actually, the law of chastity is really just a theory. We all know that, isn't it?
Yeah, so. It's a hypothesis.
Constructing theories.
Yeah. So this is a busy looking slide, but what I want you to do is focus on the yellow and the blue and the green. Okay. You got 3 steps. Make a hypothesis, test the hell out of it, turn it into a theory. And hypothesis making is actually usually kind of messy. There's no steps for it. It's just kind of chaotic. But once you get a hypothesis, you publish it, you have people review it, you have people repeat your experiments, and then you do that a whole bunch of times with a whole bunch of people trying to destroy your hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And if they can't destroy it, you finally say, okay, we're going to accept this preliminarily as a theory, but we're going to ditch it the first time it doesn't predict the output of an experiment correctly.
Okay.
So
pseudoscience. That's my favorite kind of science.
Yeah. Well, pseudoscience is a synonym for Mormonism, or it's the other way around. So the term theory has a different meaning in science than common language. I already talked about this. People will talk about conspiracy theories. There's no such thing in a scientific sense as a conspiracy theory. There are only conspiracy hypotheses. But pseudoscience they'll exploit this ambiguity. They'll talk about how they have creation theory. You see how they've done that? Creation theory. They're using that word theory to give their ideas greater weight than they deserve. Because creation theory, there's no such thing. You look at what creationists put up as creation theory and you say, how can I falsify that? Silence. No way to falsify creation theory. It's not a theory. But also simultaneously, when they talk about scientific theories, and you'll see the church doing this, there's always kind of this dripping sarcasm or something about the word theory. They'll go, oh, just the theories of men, trying to downgrade the
philosophies of men.
Philosophy.
I remember those.
Yeah. And so sometimes, pseudoscientists will use that word theory in both ways. They'll try and give themselves more credibility than they deserve, and they'll also try and undermine the credibility of the scientific evidence.
Well, I'm not trying to undermine anybody's credibility, but I do have to ask you a question. The Big Bang Theory is given a sobriquet of theory, and yet is there any way to replicate that or falsify it?
So you don't have to replicate it in order to falsify it.
Okay, so take replicate out of my question and just leave falsifying.
Yeah, so there are ways that you could falsify the Big Bang Theory, and there are some people who think that the evidence is already there, but then other people will...
Wait a second, the evidence is already there to falsify it?
Yeah. So like, it not in the way that you might be thinking. So the Big Bang Theory has built into it an origin, but also an evolution of the universe after the origin.
Right.
And so there's different ways of saying what the Big Bang Theory would predict. So the Big Bang Theory is actually built around the general theory of relativity, and there are constants or variables in those equations that require some scientific input, and then you can measure the outputs of that. So for example, you can measure how fast the universe is expanding. That's something we can measure. But that measurement has errors associated with it. And whether or not that measurement agrees with general relativity depends on how you make the measurements and how big you think the errors might be in your measurements.
Is that true across theories at this point?
It's also an example that would be true also for evolution. Like, one of the criticisms that people will make of evolution is they'll say, well, you can't falsify it because you can't rerun the experiment. And you don't have to rerun an experiment in order to falsify it. You can look at the outcome of the experiment and say how that experiment would have progressed. So I'll give you just an example with Big Bang Theory. One of the things the Big Bang Theory did was it predicts how fast the universe is expanding. It predicts what ratio of helium to lithium is in the universe. Okay, so those are two examples of things that it predicts. Not helium, hydrogen, the lighter elements, hydrogen, helium.
And it gets it right, you're saying?
Well, so there's uncertainty in the calculation, and then there's uncertainty in the measurement, but there's overlap in the calculation and the measurement.
How far off is it? Are we talking like, I don't know, 4 arc seconds?
I think in terms of the expansion, if they agree to within like 10 or 15%. So
is that good?
Well, that's a pretty small amount. It's not like the creationist who says the Earth is 7,000 years old and it's really 4.5 billion years old.
Okay, that's more than 15%.
Yeah. So when I look at this, I say to myself, well, yeah, there's enough of a disagreement here that something probably needs to be tweaked, or maybe there's even new physics. Mm-hmm. We just don't know yet. But there's not enough of a disagreement there to just say categorically that the Big Bang Theory is wrong. And more likely, it's just a case of needing to make adjustments to it.
Let me ask you a question that I think needs to be asked at this point.
Sure.
If scientists can't agree on the measurements, the specifics as you've been describing them related to the Big Bang Theory yet, should we hold it against the Book of Mormon if it can't keep its geography completely 100% consistent?
Well, I think those are two separate questions. And in the case of the Book of Mormon, there's the error, the difference between observation and prediction isn't like 80% right. It's like 0% right. There's no archaeological evidence for the Book of Mormon, period. End of statement.
There are people here. I'm sorry, it's supposed to be a joke. There are people around, in the Americas at some point.
Sure.
During the Book of Mormon times.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, but okay, so I have a slide, it might be the next slide.
Yes, your slides.
Do you know the slide where I talk about theistic creationism or theistic evolution? Keep going.
Theistic evolution. I'm not sure. Theistic evolution.
Keep going. We'll come back. Keep going. Keep going. There, stop right there.
There, the bowling ball slide.
Bowling ball. Okay. So here's an example of a kind of argument that you might find in religion. I have this theory of theistic gravity. Okay, theistic gravity. And in theistic gravity, objects move exactly as they do in general relativity, except the thing that makes them move isn't curved space-time. It's invisible fairies that are pulling on the ball. Okay? So right off the bat, you'd say, okay, theistic gravity, that's not actually a theory, right? How do you falsify that? You can't measure the fairies. You can't see the fairies. All right? So you go back to the Book of Mormon, you say, what are the falsifiable tests that you could do for the Book of Mormon? And the question is then, is it finding people in the Americas? That's not a falsifiable test for the Book of Mormon because Joseph Smith knew there were people in the Americas. It's not like the Book of Mormon isn't true or not true if there were people living in the Americas, right? So it's like theistic gravity. There's no way that doesn't count as evidence for or against. That's just like, that's not evidence at all. It's like saying water is the answer to every question.
Or Jesus is the answer to every question.
Sure.
I think I heard that in a recent general conference talk.
Yeah. But this is also, I think we were on the pseudoscience slide.
We were.
This is also an example of how Mormonism employs pseudoscience. We're one slide down. Next slide.
Okay, I'll get there in just a second. Excuse me. Here we go. Pseudoscience and Mormonism.
So pseudoscience does these kinds of things. So one of the things and on the left-hand side, I just went to AI and I said, give me the top list of things that are characteristic of pseudoscience. So it gave me what's on the left-hand side of that table. And then I'm going, holy cow, look at how well this lines up with Mormonism. So anecdotes and testimonials, what do you get every month in church, right? What do you get with every prayer? What do you get with almost every talk? Somebody is throwing a testimony at you. And this is actually an area, for example, where science and law are really different. In science, we don't care about testimonies at all. Witnesses do not matter. People are too easily fooled. They're too easily bamboozled. It's too easy for them to make mistakes and see things that aren't there. Witnesses are just pretty much irrelevant in science. You never have a testimony meeting of scientists. It won't happen. So another one is pseudoscience. In pseudoscience, they avoid having critical evaluation by experts. You know, that I loved your podcast on Professor Anthony. It was great. And one of the things I kept thinking there is that, look, if Mormonism was true, they would just take that transcript and take it to today's professors, right? We wouldn't be arguing about what some professor said 200 years ago.
Well, there's a guy out there who's taken those characters and says that he's figured it out. And I don't think he's an Egyptologist or anything, but he self-published it.
Yeah. Well, you know, when he gets it published in a peer-reviewed article and other scientists agree with him, then you'd have something. But until then, it's pretty much pseudoscience.
Yeah, I don't think he has that yet, but he's working on it.
Okay, I wish him luck. So on the next one here, you see unfalsifiable claims. Always unfalsifiable. I mean, my first comment when somebody comes up with some idea is, tell me how to falsify that. So if you look at the WAG is a wild something guess.
Oh, a wild ass guess?
Yes. So you get WAGs out of the apologists about Lehi's DNA and ancient America and stuff like that. They're all unfalsifiable. There's no way to say, oh, you have an idea. Yes. Here's how I could falsify that idea. They're all unfalsifiable. As is the new introduction to the Book of Mormon. You know, it used to say the Native Americans were Lamanites, and now they're just saying that Lamanites are among the Native Americans, but they don't say where or when or how much, and it's completely unfalsifiable.
Yeah, the Mormon Church used to make a lot of falsifiable claims, but the problem was they kept getting falsified.
That's right. And every time they get falsified, then they have to go off and change the doctrine to make it a little less testable.
Wouldn't it be much easier just to make all their claims unfalsifiable, Dwayne?
Yeah, it would. But, you know, Joseph Smith had a pretty high opinion of himself, and he didn't mind just saying whatever came into his head. And so, you know, he left the Mormon Church with this legacy of falsifiable claims. And like you said, those claims are getting knocked down right and left.
Yeah, I think we've gotten rid of most of them by now.
Yeah, a lot of them for sure. Yeah. So another one is the pseudoscience tries to put the burden of proof on the skeptics. And, you know, when I read that, the first thing that came to my head was Nibley's Book of Mormon challenge. It's like, he's like saying, well, if you can't write it, then if you can't do it, then Joseph Smith couldn't do it, and it must be from God.
I can't run a 4-minute mile, Dwayne. Can you?
No, I can't.
I mean, nobody else can.
Yeah. Yeah. So appeal to authority, you know, Mormonism is a very authoritarian religion. there's no cherry picking that. So
it's in the name. The leaders are called general authorities.
Yeah, and they are the bosses. So then cherry picking evidence, the first thing that came to my mind there was John G. Is it G or Gee?
It's Gee. I think it used to be G, but he got tired of people making fun of it so much.
Yeah, John in the Book of Abraham. It's like I don't think I've ever seen a better example of just cherry picking the evidence. And then of course conspiracies. The one that comes to my mind is like, if you don't have a testimony, it's because you're doing something bad in the bedroom or something. This
could be a conspiracy of one.
Could be, yeah. and then the use of scientific sounding language, using jargon. So I get worn out listening to Mormon apologists talk about how they have theories, but none of their theories are falsifiable, so they don't count as theories in the first place.
Very good. All right. Mormon epistemology.
Yeah, so you remember the science epistemology chart was kind of messy and chaotic, because that's kind of how science is. You can't herd scientists any better than you can herd cats. You have to there are rules they have to follow, but you get all these bright people that are just thinking independently and doing their own thing, and they have to all come together and agree on something. So in Mormonism, though, the epistemology, and I welcome anybody that wants to tell me this is wrong. It's linear, it's emotional, it's authoritarian, and it's absolutely hostile towards criticism. And you remember how important I said critics are to science. Science doesn't work at all without critics. You have to have people who are willing to look at things and say, what if this is wrong? What if
scientists by their nature almost are all critics?
Yeah, that's part of the job. Yeah. So, Mormons will say, yeah, we're told to study and pray and get the burning in your bosom. But if you look at those last two diamonds, it's got to get through those last two diamonds or it's not truth. And those last two diamonds say, does it strengthen the church? And is it approved by the general authorities? And if it's not, then you need to go back and study and pray some more.
Yeah, I like this. I just want to describe this for people who can't see this, the slide. We study, we pray. Those are the things that we can actually do. We can control, right? But then the promise is the burning in the bosom, or the spiritual manifestation. If you don't get that, you go back and you study and pray some more. If you do get it, you go to the next step, which is this strengthening faith in the LDS Church? Because if the burning in your bosom is about something that doesn't strengthen your faith in the LDS Church, then you need to go back and study and pray some more. But if you can get past burning in your bosom, strengthens faith in the church, and it's approved by church authorities, which if it strengthens faith in the church, it probably will be approved by church authorities. If that's a yes, then that's absolute truth. But if it's not approved by church authorities, you once again have to go back, study, and pray some more. The amazing thing about it is that there's 5 steps to this, 6 if you count truth, which is the end goal, right? But there is no way in this diagram, which I admit is an accurate reflection of Mormonism and their epistemology. There's no way in this diagram to find out that what you're studying is not true.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So as an example, there was a bishop not too long ago in the church who, through study and prayer, because I listened to his podcast, he came to the conclusion that the church needed to do background checks on people in the church who work with youth. I think he had, from what I could tell, he had the study part, the prayer part, and the burning in the bosom part. The church authorities said no, and they excommunicated the guy. So,
well, obviously he wasn't teaching the truth then. The church would not excommunicate someone for telling the truth. That's the only thing I know.
Yeah. Well, you hope not, but
don't you agree, Dwayne?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So for the next one.
All right. So here's I call this like popular epistemology in the Mormon church. The popular epistemology in the Mormon Church is truth. What church? What truth? I already know the answer. I don't need to do anything. I already know the answer. And I think that actually happens in Mormonism a lot. I think
it reminds me of the famous quote from Sherlock Holmes: "There's nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact."
Yes. It could remind you of Carrie Mulstein, who said that he starts out with the assumption that it's true, and then he just kind of makes the evidence fit that assumption.
I can't imagine why UCLA is embarrassed about giving this guy a doctorate in Egyptology.
It's hard to believe that there's a professor at a major university that would say something that like that.
I know, but it's a feature at BYU. It's not a bug.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, I'm ready to call it. I'm the ump there, calling the strike. Epistemology as a science and Mormonism are in total conflict. Absolutely total conflict. Nothing in common.
Got it. And then there's a few testable Mormon hypotheses.
Yeah, these still haven't been cleaned up yet. So one is the nature of God. So Joseph Smith, bless his heart, he wanted to make Mormonism something cool. And so he gave God a body of flesh and bones.
Yes,
And
he did.
He did. He gave. Also, I should just let
by 1843.
I'll let the audience know that those are hyperlinked in the text, and to the references, and that I also have replicated those hyperlinks at the end in the reference sections of the slides. So I'm not asking anybody here to believe me what I'm saying. Go look at the references and see for yourself. Joseph Smith said God has a body of flesh and bones. And that single statement there, which is scripture in the Mormon Church, it has a lot of really powerful knock-on consequences. And one of those is that, according to Mormon doctrine, a 2-kilogram meat computer knows everything and is all powerful. And that's a pretty big statement to say. That's definitely a testable hypothesis.
Well, the difference is we only use like 10% of our brains, but God uses 110% of his.
Yeah, well, the universe is a really big place, and 110%, you couldn't even control a teacup.
He's got a really big head. He's like mega mind.
Yeah, he could. In my book, I pointed out that some Mormons that I've talked to, they've said, well, God has the Urim and Thummim. And my response to that is, well, that's interesting, because now you're telling me that God isn't all powerful because he needs a tool called the Urim and Thummim. And oh, by the way, even a Urim and Thummim the size of the planet Earth couldn't control the universe. So it doesn't solve the problem, but it just creates a few new ones.
How about if it's the size of Jupiter?
Yeah, it still doesn't work. People just don't. It's hard to wrap your head around how big the universe is. The universe is absolutely enormous. It would take light about 11 billion years to travel across the universe.
That's if we froze it right now in its expansion.
If we just froze it down. If you could freeze the universe right now, it'd take light to about 11 billion years. And that's just the observable universe. The real universe could be much bigger than what's observable.
That's a big place.
So the universe is enormous. There are 100. The numbers get so big they get ridiculous, but there's basically 100 billion galaxies, each with 100 billion stars. It's probably more than that. The numbers get so big that you just can't comprehend it. But what you can comprehend is that a 2-kilogram meat computer can't control that. It's just not possible. And we'll talk about that later. Another one is that God is the creator of all living things. Every single thing that was created by God. And then it's like, oh yeah, well, that means God made malaria. And that's a bigger problem than just the problem of evil. Why does God let evil exist? This is a problem of why did God create malaria? And by the way, there's lots of human-specific pathogens.
Yeah, and I know we'll get into that. Well,
Yeah.
malaria has feelings too, Dwayne.
I'm sure it does. But when I think about that, I'm thinking, malaria is designed to kill people. Who did the designing? Well, according to Mormonism, it was Jesus. And again, this is kind of like, I come back to this problem that I had with the Midianites. It's like, when you look at the implications of Mormon doctrine, Mormon God is a real nasty guy. He's not good.
I've come to conclude that if there's a God that exists, he's very different than most people would like to envision him or her.
Yeah.
He's not big on the love.
Yeah. So another one is, according to Mormonism, there is a universal flood. Again, there's the hyperlink. You can go follow all of the facts there. There's no question about it. There's an Ensign article a couple years ago that was actually very specific and said Mormons are different from other Christians because we believe in a literal universal flood.
Woohoo!
Yeah. The creation, a specific defined order in the creation, things like this. Humans were created, two people were created 6,000 years ago, and they're the mother and father of all humans. But, there were entire civilizations on this planet 6,000 years ago in China and other places. There were civilizations. I don't know if they're civilizations. There's certainly people living in the Americas more than 6,000 years ago. It's a testable statement. It's completely falsified.
I think it was created about 6,029 years ago now.
Oh, okay. Well, that helps. 29 years. Yeah. The whole Book of Mormon turns into a giant falsifiable proposition. And then the one that I like the most, Mormons claim to have superpowers. Okay. And I've had people push back on me and say, no, we don't. And I say, wait a minute. The Doctrine and Covenants says you have a God inside of you. Okay, D&C 130, it says that God has a body of flesh and bones, and Jesus has a body of flesh and bones, but the Holy Ghost is a personage of spirit, so he can dwell within you. So you have a God who was there at the creation of the universe, and that God is in you. And Mormons tell you that this God is going to tell you all truth. He's your conduit to know the truth. And you get this God in you by using the power of God, which is the priesthood, which, by the way, is another superpower.
Before that, you were talking about the gift of the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So two superpowers. One is the priesthood, and the other is the Holy Ghost. Those are two superpowers. Mormons have them. Where's the evidence that they have these superpowers? How can I falsify that proposition? Well, one way I could do it is Mormons say that the Holy Ghost tells them all the truth of all things. So one way to do it would be I'm going to look and see if Mormons as a group are that smart, quite frankly, because if they have this superpower, RFM, you're into comics, right?
Marvel.
Okay.
He said, proudly displaying his new T-shirt.
Yeah, I like your T-shirt. So suppose that you're standing on the street corner in New York City, and a guy walks up to you, and he's in a cape, and he's dressed like Superman, and he goes, "Hi, RFM, I'm Superman."
Well, he's in Metropolis. It could be Spider-Man. Spider-Man is in New York City. Okay,
either one. This analogy works. What are you going to ask the guy to do? He says, "I'm Superman. Watch," and he jumps over a chair. Are you impressed?
I need more.
You need more, right?
Because a guy could jump over a chair.
A guy could jump over a chair.
You don't have to be super.
Right? You don't have to be super. Same thing. Mormons say, they come on the scene and they say, we have superpowers. We have the power of God. We're the only ones with the power of God. And you can't get the Holy Ghost without us giving it to you by the power of God. Okay, superpowers. Show me. Jump over a tall building. Or in the case of Mormonism, show me that you have this great discernment, this great power of discernment, and this great fountain of knowledge within you. Otherwise, where's the superpower? It's a testable, it's a falsifiable and testable claim.
Right. But the one thing that's testable about it, which is the ability to heal people by the power of the priesthood, is not talked about very much in Mormonism. In fact, we go for conferences and conferences without even hearing one story about somebody being healed by priesthood power.
Yeah. And I think I've seen this comment made on Reddit by a number of people, is that if Mormons had the superpower that they proclaim the superpower. I'm not telling them they have it. If they had it, there would be people making pilgrimages to Utah hospitals to see how they managed to cure all the people that are sick.
Well, I will have you know that when I was at the MTC back in 1979, not that much longer after you, the stories were rife about the CIA sending over their best men, top men, working on it to try and figure out how is it that the Mormons can teach these young kids foreign languages so quickly, much more quickly than the CIA can do. And they're trying to study it and figure it out so you can take it back to, what is it, Langley?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess they have to get, they have to have the laying on of hands. But
did you hear that?
I did. Yeah.
Did everybody hear that? That was at the MTC? I heard that at the MTC. I believed that.
I totally heard that at the MTC. Absolutely. That was that the government was trying to understand how the Mormons could learn foreign languages so well.
It's almost like part of Mormonism understands what a falsifiable claim would look like, and that this would be really cool if it were true. So we'll just make it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is falsifiable and it's falsified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Now here's this slide.
All right. So this kind of presses it home. I'm a scientist. I'm compelled by facts and reason that anthropomorphic global warming is real. And if you don't believe that, click the hyperlink. But the point is that since it's real, and if Mormons had the Holy Ghost superpower, they should be at the top of this chart, not at the bottom. And in fact,
okay, so at the top of the chart, okay, you got a blue line and then a yellow line and a red line.
Yeah.
True?
Blue is accepts, yellow is conditionally accepts, and I think red is rejects.
So blue lines are the gullible people who believe that anthropomorphic global warming is real. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll put us down there. So blue, and up, is that all Americans? 61%.
Yeah, all Americans. Yeah, yeah.
And then they have all these different other religions, and you get down to the one that you circled, that's the Latter-day Saints. So on the average, 61% of Americans.
No, you got to go down a little further. Latter-day Saints are down further.
Well, it's the 48%, right?
Yeah, it's 48%. Oh, you got your cursor up at up a little higher.
I don't need to have any cursor.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. It looks different on my screen than I guess it does on yours, but that's fine. 48% is the one that you circled in magenta.
Yeah.
So that's 13% less than the general population.
Yeah.
I want to know what you're going to do about those white evangelical Protestants. They're all the way down at 31%.
Yeah. Well, I would never claim that Mormons are the worst. I'm just claiming that this evidence shows that they don't have the Holy Ghost. Because if they did, they would know that anthropomorphic global warming is real.
And you even have something like this a little bit further about a different concept. I won't spoil it by sharing it right now. Okay. Yeah. So let's go here to a testable hypothesis. This is about the brain, right?
Yeah.
Going back to the brain.
This is in order to know how big of a problem this is, you kind of have to know some things about physics. And one of the things you need to know is that the universe is impossibly huge, and that a signal from a piece of matter across the universe takes billions of years. The other thing you need to know is that when it comes to computational power takes energy. And you can set, using modern physics, you can set a minimum amount of energy that's required to flip 1 bit. Then it's very easy to say, well, I'd have to flip a certain number of bits to control the universe. And if I did that with a brain the size of a human that goes in a human head, it would evaporate. It would melt it. It would vaporize it. It would get so hot just from the computational effort.
Oh, okay. Things I had never thought of because I'm not a scientist.
So again, this is patently absurd. This is silly. And if you say this to Mormon apologists, they'll tell you that. They'll say, this is patently absurd. This is silly. But this is the natural conclusion that you reach when somebody like Joseph Smith says, oh, God has a physical body. He didn't know. He wasn't thinking about it. It's just that he thought that why not give God a physical brain? Well, this is one of the reasons why not.
Well, that's why there have to be 3 people in the Godhead. So you got 3 brains working, 2 regular brains and 1 spirit brain. If you got 3 brains doing it, that could handle the universe, couldn't it?
No, not even close. But, I wouldn't put it past them to make that argument.
I'm doing my best here.
Now, I have brought this up with some people that I know, and they said, well, the Holy Ghost doesn't have a physical brain. So the Holy Ghost is all the thinking, and then he passes on the answers to God and Jesus.
That's why some people think the Holy Ghost is a woman.
That's probably true. I would put my money there. And that actually takes the whole argument out of the falsifiable, testable column.
Wow. Do you think that was the point?
Yeah. So it does that. So it solves the problem of being falsifiable and testable, but at the same time, it also makes God second fiddle. Right.
Right.
And so now you kind of get an understanding of why a lot of people think they look a little cross-eyed or askew at Mormon God, because, there's a lot of problems in Christianity at large, but they didn't make the problem of giving, they don't have the problem of giving their God a physical body.
Right. And then there was this whole thing that you said that a human-sized brain of flesh can't do in order to control the universe.
Yeah, I mean, it would violate thermodynamics and causality and locality, all these principles in physics. It's not that it just violates them a little bit. It's like it violates them hopelessly large. It's just, you don't even need to do a calculation to know that it's off by orders of magnitude.
Oh,
way too big.
Okay, wow. So let's see what's next here. Evolution. Oh, this is a great one. I love this one about evolution because you pointed out some things to me that I had not considered before.
Yeah. Well, first of all, evolution is about all life. It's not just about the rabbits and the dogs and the leopards. It includes people. And if people aren't part of it, then if you come along and say, oh, everything evolved except people, well, that's not what evolution is. Okay. That's not the theory of evolution. If that were true, it would actually falsify evolution.
Can you explain that? Okay. Wait, no. I think I understand. You're saying that people are included in the theory of evolution, and that if you try and separate people from evolution and say everything else was evolving, which is a common apologetic trope, but that Adam and Eve were still special creations of God, then what you've done by including a special creation is now you falsified evolution. Yeah,
the theory of evolution would be falsified by that, because a big part of the evidence for the theory of evolution is the genes in your body. You have genes in your body that come from an ancestor, a common ancestor of octopi. You have genes in your body that come from a common ancestor of fish. You can't separate them. We're all tied together. Genetically, the history of our evolution is written in our genes, and it's very clear that we share genetic genes with other animals. Well over 95% of the genes, the genetic material in your body and mine, is shared with chimps. So you can't separate humans from animals and still have evolution. You've got something else. And so but it works in reverse. So if the idea that there was an Adam and Eve, if that idea would falsify the theory of evolution, the fact that evolution is true means there was no Adam and Eve. It works the other way around too. I mean, science hits back,
That's interesting, because our thumbnail has a picture. It's an AI photo that was done by our great artist who does these things, Anthony. Mm-hmm. And it shows Adam and Eve, and they're being chased by a T-Rex.
Yeah.
So putting that in what you're telling me, if that were supposed to reflect reality, it could not have both. Adam and Eve, their existence as special creations, would falsify evolution, so the dinosaur would not be chasing them. Or if the dinosaur is a product of evolution, he would not be chasing a specially created Adam and Eve.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. And so the other thing to remember about evolution is that it's a natural process. Okay. It's driven by natural processes like genetic drift and mutation. Sexual selection is another big one. And it is supported by just so much evidence. It's hard to overemphasize how much evidence supports evolution.
It was a pretty good theory, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, enough so that today the word evolution can mean the fact of evolution, the fact that you evolved and I evolved from earlier life forms, and then the theory of evolution that explains how that happened. Okay, so you and I and everybody else, we evolved from other animals. The theory of evolution explains how that happens. So now we're back
at the bowling slide again. So that now it'll fit chronologically.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen, there is a paper written called The Mormon Myth of Evil Evolution. It's in Dialogue, and he quoted John Whitsoe. I didn't dig up this quote myself. I'm quoting somebody else who quoted John Whitsoe as saying that evolution is, of course we believe in evolution because we believe in change. Well, that's garbage. That's word salad. I don't know what that means.
I think it was also Whitsoe or Talmage who observed that God himself in Mormon theology is evolving from a lesser being to a greater being.
Yeah, see, this is another misconception about evolution. Individuals do not evolve in the evolutionary sense. Species evolve, individuals adapt. And species evolve by having some members of the species removed from the gene pool.
Okay? Those who don't adapt.
Those that don't adapt. So there's an awful lot of confusion going on with what you described by these Mormon, I guess they're scientists or apostles or whatever, where they're trying to equate the theory of organic evolution with adapting and changing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what the theory is. It's completely out of wax with what the theory is.
So is your idea there in the second part that theistic evolution, that idea that evolution did occur and it was God's manner of creating man and life on this earth, especially man, because we're the most important, right? We're talking about it here.
Yeah.
So, but is it your position then that the term theistic evolution is itself an oxymoron?
Yeah, theistic evolution is unfalsifiable. How could you prove that God was pulling the strings, right?
And if evolution has already been defined a priori as something that happens naturally, then inserting God into it would make it an oxymoron, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. And this is why I included this quote by Laplace. He was a French mathematician, and Napoleon asked him, he says, "Why didn't you include God in all of your calculations?" And Laplace said, "Well, I didn't have a need for that hypothesis."
Because Laplace, that little son of a gun, thought that he was so smart, he'd figured out the celestial mechanics without the need to appeal to a divine creator.
Yeah. And that's the way it is with evolution. The theory of evolution explains how species evolve. And not once ever in the history of the sciences has somebody had to say, gosh, we need to invoke God here. theistic evolution is a product of religions, and it's theology. It's not science.
Well, and in fact, it would be one of the things you can't do in science, right? Because as soon as you invoke God, what you're doing is you're making something unfalsifiable, right?
Yeah, it's unfalsifiable. It's untestable. So it's something I think that's used by apologists to make non-scientific Mormons feel better. You know, like maybe somebody who's smarter than me has figured this out.
You nibbly.
Yeah. Yeah, I got that a lot. You know, when I was deconstructing for Mormonism, I read Nibley's books, and I was not impressed. A lot of people say he was a great scholar, but I'll tell you, I was not impressed.
Well, you were smarter than I, because I was I didn't understand what the heck he was talking about for like 80% of everything, and I tried, but I figured the 80% that I couldn't understand was just the stuff that I'm not smart enough to understand. And if I were smart enough to understand it, it would show me exactly what it's obviously showing you Nibley, which is that the church is true.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's a technique that the church sometimes employs with their apologists to try and just shut people off. Is we're smart, you're dumb, listen to us and shut up. And the reality is you're probably smarter than the rest of them, and you can figure it out as well or better than anybody else. And I'm saying that to the audience, not just you. I mean, anybody out there has the intellectual capacity. Anybody who's listening to this podcast has the intellectual capacity to figure out Mormonism.
I would even say that's the great secret that they don't want you to know, which is that you're smart enough to figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
But everything else is based on that premise. So things have to be hidden, things have to be misinterpreted or misquoted or whatever. All the things that we've covered in Mormonism live, as well as Radio Free Mormon for these many years. That is all based on the idea, the reality that the members can figure this out for themselves. So we have to keep the truth from them.
Yeah. Bully people into submission. So one of a common approach when talking about Mormonism and science and evolution is to go mining quotes. And you can find somebody in the Mormon church who said everything about any subject. And so people go quote mining, and they the apologists line up their quotes, and the other guys line up their quotes, and it's quote bashing. But you got to understand and remember always that when you're quoting somebody, you're making an assumption about that person. The first assumption that you're making is that the person you're quoting understands Mormonism. And the second assumption that you're making is that the person you're quoting understands evolution. And then if you're quoting Mormon sources, you have to make the assumption they're not lying for the Lord. And you notice on all of those, I've got them hyperlinked. Follow the hyperlinks, see what I'm saying. So Russell Nelson's a good example. I think he's still president of the church, right? I think so.
Yes, to the best of my knowledge, he remains so.
So he has gone on record as saying there's no conflict between Mormonism and science.
That was kind of a surprise from a heart surgeon.
Yeah. So he says he asserts there's no conflict between Mormonism and science. And then in another interview, he says dogs didn't evolve so he said dogs have always been dogs.
Yes.
And so here's Mr. Nelson saying two completely conflicting things. And it's clear to me that he either doesn't understand religion or he doesn't understand science, or maybe it's a little of both.
Well, he is just a heart surgeon. It's not like it's anything difficult like brain surgery.
Well, yeah, I don't know about that, but I find it difficult to understand how somebody could graduate from college, let alone become a surgeon, and not understand the theory of evolution.
I know. He's really just a glorified plumber when you think about it.
Well, yeah, or carpenter, but anyway, carpenters use saws. So the other problem is that people will trot out statements that they claim are official. So official statements have all the problems of quote mining, but on top of that, there's the problem that nobody can agree on what's official Mormon doctrine. There is
Yes,
no,
and I gave you the definition before we started the show when we were still on the phone. I said I can define Mormon doctrine for you. Mormon doctrine is the shit that never changes.
well, that means it's just the empty set.
Well, you call it what you like, Mr. Scientist, but because once it changes, it's not doctrine anymore. So
That's
I think
right.
it's the only essential definition of doctrine in the Mormon Church. It's just the stuff that never changes.
But I think I've heard you say it, or maybe John DeLynn said it. Every doctrine in Mormonism has changed.
Yeah, Charlie Harrell.
Yeah,
There's wrote a book about it.
There's no doctrine in the Mormon Church that hasn't changed.
No, so really, there's no doctrine left.
Yeah, there's no doctrine. It's just whatever.
The empty set.
Yeah, it is the empty set. Yeah, pay your tithing. That's the only one. Well, that one's changed too.
Oh, all over the place.
Yeah, changed all over the place.
Yes, and now they've changed it to where they get the most money from their members.
Yeah.
Coincidentally.
Yeah. So it is the empty set. I'm sticking.
I suppose
with
they
that.
could make tithing 100%. Just add another zero. They haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
So.
What's another zero?
But that's what the law of consecration is.
You're right. And that was actually one of the changes is they started out with the law of consecration. Help me with my history, but they started out with the law of consecration and that blew up in their face. So then they said, okay, just 10%.
Yeah, of your increase. But you know what? We still take a vow in the temple that we will obey the law of consecration, that everything we are, can be, own, just everything, our children, our wives, our fortunes, and our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, and our wives too. All of that belongs to the kingdom of God on earth, specifically designated in the temple, in case anybody's asleep, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
And we bow our head and we say, yes, we will obey the law of consecration.
Yeah. When I went through the temple the first time, all the other crazy stuff, well, the poncho was a little bit, I went through in 74. I think it was 74. Yeah, 74. I went through in
poncho and the washings and anointings.
That was, I thought, this is weird. But the point where I really sat up and paid attention and listened was when they said they get everything I own, everything, even the shirt off my back, apparently. So yeah. You might as well be playing that great 70s song about, was it bread? I would give everything I own. Yeah, I love that song. Just to have you once again. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. I was going to say, I used to have to listen to that on the down and low in my bedroom because rock and roll was against the rules when I was a kid. Does bread really qualify as rock and roll, do you think? Well, it did for my parents. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we've already hit on Adam and Eve, I think, quite a bit. Here's on the left, you can see the proof. Those are all the citations. If anybody thinks that Mormonism doesn't teach a literal Adam and Eve, please read those citations. Yeah, and I want to mention just a couple of these, okay? I know we're running a bit long, but these are really important because we talk about Adam and Eve. I mean, we've got Adam and Eve as the centerpiece of the most sacred ordinance that most Mormons know about, okay? Other than the second anointing. And maybe marriage too, because that happens after you have your endowment. Anyway, Adam and Eve, central figures in the endowment. And it is true in Mormonism, and you give a lot of great references here, that it is really hard to get around the literalness of Adam and Eve being the first man and woman. You've got Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, which outlines the priesthood line of authority from Moses. And yeah, it's important to Mormons. The priesthood line of authority from Moses all the way back to a guy named Adam, and describes Adam as the first man. Pretty literal. Our entire priesthood chain and our priesthood authority depends upon Adam being a literal person. Among the great, and the next one is Doctrine and Covenants 138, where he is seen by Joseph Smith in this vision. They cut out the part where he also sees Michael, but he does see Adam here. Adam, the Ancient of Days and Father of all. So in vision, Joseph Smith sees Adam, who is specifically designated as the father of all. That's in Doctrine and Covenants 138. In Mosiah 28, we have a Book of Mormon mentions Adam 26 times throughout.
and each time in a matter-of-fact and literal way. Typical example was the Mosiah 28:17, which talks about things going all the way back even until the creation of Adam. Doctrine and Covenants 107, another section dealing with the priesthood. And it is devoted to the establishment of the priesthood in Joseph Smith's church. It describes Adam and his posterity and their priesthood lineage, with Adam being described clearly as a specified historical figure. So it does the same kind of thing in Doctrine and Covenants section 107 as it does in 84, both of them priesthood sections. And then in Moses, man, this is like everywhere in Mormon scripture. Doctrine and Covenants all over the place, and the Book of Mormon and the Pearl of Great Price, not with Joseph Smith translation, Moses 3:7. I, the Lord God, formed man from the dust of the earth, breathed into his nostrils, breath of life, became a living soul, the first flesh upon the earth, the first man also. Shoot, that is tough to get around, isn't it? That's Moses chapter 3:7, that Adam, that God formed man from the dust of the ground, and man became a living soul, the first flesh upon the earth, the first man also.
I mean, wow. I think he was saying that Adam predated the animals.
He is, because here's where Moses 3:7, where the JST is combining the two creation accounts from Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. And he's going to have all the animals created after Adam, right?
Yeah.
And then brought before him to be named. So Adam is the first flesh and the first man, but the first flesh because no other flesh has been. But everything else was created before him in the spirit. Moses 3 verse 7 tells us, in order to clarify and iron out that wrinkle between those creation accounts.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the flood.
Yeah. So Mormonism, again, same thing. Second verse, same as the first. They teach a literal universal global flood. And in addition to all the other problems that Mormonism that the flood has, with geology and physics and so forth, it also has a problem with evolution too, because one of the things that we learn through our study of evolution is that there's a certain minimum population of animals below which a species will go extinct.
The SVM.
Yeah. And that number, it varies, but it's roughly 50. It's certainly not 2.
So what does the SVM stand for? I forget.
I'd have to look at, I can't, I think it's L something. It's least.
Maybe I've got it wrong here. Let me just check this out. Sorry if it's the next one.
It's
MVP.
Minimum
MVP, most valuable player is what it stands for.
Yeah, MVP is minimum viable population.
Okay. And this was something that was really interesting to me that I don't think I'd considered before about Noah's Ark, is that science tells us that there's a minimum viable population of a species, that if it gets below that amount, you may as well just kiss them goodbye because there's not enough for them to reproduce in a way to grow.
Yeah.
Is that basically it?
That's basically it. I mean, really, if you just look at the story the way it's written, the ark wouldn't have accomplished what the ark was supposed to have accomplished, which is to keep all the animals from being destroyed.
Right. And so hundreds and thousands of years ago, whoever's writing this story down, I'm sure it had been passed along mouth to mouth over many generations, but finally gets written down, right? And they're looking ahead and they're going, hey, guess what? We got to have a male and a female of each animal, each kind of animal.
Yeah.
So that once the flood's over, then they can reproduce and we can have all the different animals we have today, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But they didn't know about the MVP.
Yeah.
They thought the MVP was 2.
Yeah. And probably one of the most famous examples is the California condor. And I think its population actually dropped down to maybe 29 or something like that. I'm going from memory. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. And it took all of the concentrated effort of a dedicated group of scientists to keep that species from going extinct. And it's probably still not out of the woods. But you think 29 individuals, well, there were only 2 lions on the ark, according to the story. And if you do say, okay, well, the story was wrong, they really did carry an MVP of all of them. Now, all of a sudden, the ark has to be 100 times bigger.
Yeah.
It's just it's a crazy, stupid story. It's a really cool child's story. It's like Santa Claus. If you treat it if you treat it as just like a story to learn a lesson from, but it's not true.
Yeah.
It's got a place. But as soon as you try and put this stamp of literalism on it, which the Mormon Church does, it makes it literal. Then you have a falsifiable, testable proposition, and it blows up in your face.
I want to read this first quote up here. It's from Donald Perry, who was a BYU scholar. I think he was in the religion department. And it's an article titled "The Flood in the Tower of Babel" is published in the Ensign back in January of 1998. And here's what he says. There is a third group of people, those who accept the literal messaging of the Bible regarding Noah. See, literal? Those who accept the literal message of the Bible regarding Noah, the ark, and the deluge. Latter-day Saints belong to this group.
Boom.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course they do.
Yeah.
What's the problem with believing in the literal flood, though?
Well, it goes at loggerheads with science, and science wins.
Well, not all science, really. There must be some field of science that agrees with the Great Flood.
I can't think of any.
Well, I can't either, but I was hoping you'd.
Maybe, here's honestly, honest. If a BYU professor of evolution or biology can explain how you really could have a literal Adam and Eve and a literal global flood as taught by the Mormon Church, and that still works with evolution, I'd like to hear him try and explain that.
Yeah. Basically, the flood would be an extinction event.
Yeah. It's starting all over.
Hey, does the MVP apply to people too?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Adam and Eve.
8 of them.
Well, it's even with Adam and Eve. It's like, people make fun of this all the time. Like, did Adam have a navel? That's a weak one. But seriously, who did Adam and Eve's kids marry?
Well, each other, but that's because the blood was so much purer back then.
Yeah. Well, there's another there's another untestable, unfalsifiable wag right there.
Well, it must have been because they didn't seem to have a whole lot of problems in multiplying and replenishing the earth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Except that at the time of Adam and Eve, the Chinese had already done a pretty good job of multiplying.
Yeah, it's all very strange, actually. It is circles within circles, and ultimately, I think science comes out victorious in most of these skirmishes.
Yeah, science likes to have a global explanation that can be looked at in whole. And Mormon apologists, Mormon apologetics, and I think you've pointed this out.
Yes.
It's like they're looking through a straw, and they look at one little place and they have a story, and they look at some other place and they have a story, and the stories don't line up.
No.
Nothing lines up. There's no global theory. It's just a bunch of people running themselves ragged, trying to come up with this excuse and that excuse as to why things don't work.
Mormon apologists looking through a straw darkly.
Yes. Yeah. So you should write a paper on that.
I think I should just get some merchandise.
Yeah, that would work. I'd buy it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So how about this slide? Mormonism does have an official position on evolution, because this is in response to the idea that we hear, which strangely seems to have to, I don't know, I haven't studied this as much as I might have, at least not recently, but I remember that there was a statement that was made by President David O. McKay, which may not have actually even been published in anything Mormon related, but it was more in the way of correspondence with a scientific / medical friend of his. And
it was a letter.
Saying, that Mormonism, the church, does not have an official position on the subject of evolution. And it was because, even without researching it, my friend, it was because this scientist guy was writing David O. McKay about what the F is up with your friend, Joseph Fielding Smith, and his book about evolution is the only way. Not evolution is the only way. Evolution is wrong, and creation is the way that God did it. Man, his origin and destiny. That's the book that prompted it.
Yeah. Well, as long as the church has an official position on Adam and Eve and the flood, like it or not, they're stuck with that. They have an official position on evolution.
And would you just fill that out just a little bit? Because I think this is a really important point to underscore.
Yeah, well, if the church says there was a literal Adam and Eve, that doctrine is wholly inconsistent with the theory of evolution. If they say that there was a literal flood and a man named Noah, that doctrine is wholly inconsistent with the theory of evolution. And in fact, if there was an Adam and Eve, if we discovered an Adam and Eve, that would falsify the theory of evolution. Evolution is a scientific theory. It can be falsified. And one way to falsify it would be to find out that there really was a man and a woman named Adam and Eve. Names don't matter, but the humans are the product of two wholly created animals, human animals, at the time of Adam and Eve. And
I'm guessing the name Lucy isn't going to fill the bill completely.
No, and Lucy was our last common ancestor. So a common ancestor is one that we all have in common. But at the time of Lucy, there were probably 500,000 hominids on the planet, if not more. And
nobody has ever thought, I think, that Lucy was a special creation.
No.
Was that the Uvalde Gorge?
What's that?
Was she found in the Uvalde Gorge?
In Africa, I think. I don't know the name of the gorge.
Okay, but I'm not sure either. But
the same goes for the Noah's flood. You can't have an event like Noah's flood and not have that show up in the DNA of every animal on the planet. It would show up. It doesn't. So as long as the church has official doctrine around the flood and Adam and Eve, they have an official doctrine on a position on evolution.
I'll bet it was Old Uvalde.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Uvalde's in Texas. I get them confused for some reason.
Well, you're from
Texas. Then you had this thing. This is the second slide about evolution.
Yeah. Well, again, where's the superpower? And I'm not the one saying they have it. Mormons say they have the superpower. So if they had the superpower, go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm. Going to the next slide. Obviously, the Mormons are not being righteous enough.
Yeah, if Mormons had this superpower, they would know evolution's true, and they wouldn't be down there next to the Jehovah's Witnesses in denying that evolution actually is something that happened.
Evangelical Protestants are ahead of Mormons on this chart. On this issue.
That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, they're at 24, whereas Mormons are at 22. But what was it that they were? Global warming, that they were way below the Mormons. Mormons were like at 41 and they were 31.
Yeah.
46, 31 something.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, with, if somebody says they've got a God in them, they say that this God is giving them information about all truth. This should never happen. This graph should never happen.
Okay. I understand. That part I get. Let's see. Book of Mormon, you say the Book of Mormon is another testable hypothesis.
Oh, yeah, in spades. According to the Book of Mormon, there were at least two, and I think you might be able to say three.
Yeah.
Mass migrations, significant migrations from the old world to the new world. Mm-hmm. And these people, the emphasis I wanted to put here, we talk a lot about the people. But these people brought animals, they brought plants, they brought bushels probably full of grain. That's certainly a strong implication in the Book of Mormon. They brought bushels full of grain.
And seeds.
And those bushels probably had invasive other seeds in them. That would find me a bushel full of grain that doesn't have some other seed in it. Anyway, they brought these seeds and they planted them in the ground, and the Book of Mormon says they grew exceedingly. Well, you can't contain that stuff. It gets on the wind, it blows around. We should see in the record, archaeological record of ancient America, the very distinct and obvious impulse of invasive species from these migrations, and we don't see them.
Apologists by the way, by and large, you're absolutely correct. And I'm just bringing up this so you can respond to it. Apologists hang a lot of weight on the discovery of some barley in around New Mexico or something. Is that right? Ancient New Mexico.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
That barley originated in the Americas. It's native. It's a native plant. It's not an invasive plant from Europe.
So even though it shares the name, scientists can tell that it's not something that came over here from the old world.
Oh, yeah. They can tell you if you're the father of some kid, too.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah. I mean, that's how genetics works, right? You can trace origins using genetics.
But you can do it with seeds, too, huh?
Yeah. I mean, they're at the genetic level, they're not that different.
So really, this is what's going on here, right? Is
Yeah.
that we've got barley in the old world, and the idea being that there wouldn't be any barley here before Columbus, right?
Well, European type barley, yeah.
Okay, European, but barley, right? So this is the shifting definition.
Well,
Talk about a loan word.
So this is Mormon apologists trying to defocus trying to defocus what the claim is in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon says they brought the seeds from ancient Europe, from the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
It said they brought these seeds from the Middle East, and they planted them and they grew. So the testable hypothesis is we should find lots of plants in America that originated from roughly 600 BC, that came from the Middle East. What the apologists have done is they said, oh, look, here's a plant with the same name. It evolved in Americas, but we're going to ignore that, and we're going to call it a hit.
Those effers, because I've read a lot of articles about that as an apologist, and I never once saw anybody say, by the way, these are not the same ones as those that came from the old world.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that either until I went and looked it up. I looked up the actual research papers on the origin of that barley. Now, I'm going from memory here. I might have gotten a few facts wrong, but I'm pretty sure that barley originated in the Americas.
Well, I would imagine so. Okay, well, very good. Are you ready for the next one?
I wasn't expecting that. You threw me a curveball, so I am going from memory here.
I did. Well, I would expect that it would have kind of upended the entire field of the history of the Americas, the ancient history of the Americas, if this barley had actually come from the old world before Columbus or before Europeans got here.
Yeah. So this, can I throw in another comment here? So like, if the testable hypothesis is we should find evidence of a big influx of invasive species.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't find an influx of invasive species that lines up time-wise with the Book of Mormon, that disproves the Book of Mormon, right? Right there.
No. Say that again, and let's talk about it a little bit more, because I think that's very important.
Yeah, if the Book of Mormon makes the claim that there were migrations that brought large amounts of species that would have been invasive, an invasive species by definition is one that's taken out of its native environment and put in a new environment,
which the Book of Mormon does, unquestionably.
Yeah, so that would have been a large impulse of invasive species. The expectation is that you'd find evidence of that. You'd go looking for it. If you can't find it, that counts as evidence against the Book of Mormon. It would falsify the Book of Mormon to the extent that you're confident in how wide you sampled and how careful you were and how accurate your measurements were. But that would be a falsifiable claim of the Book of Mormon that got knocked down. Now, with the disproving, if you do find it, that doesn't prove the Book of Mormon's true, because they could have come over with some other group. It could have come from the Vikings. And this is where apologists consistently fail to understand that evidence can count against the Book of Mormon, but not the other way around. If you found horses in ancient America, that would not prove the Book of Mormon, because it's completely reasonable to say Joseph Smith just assumed the Indians are riding horses and he put them in his storybook. So finding horses in ancient America would not prove the Book of Mormon's true. Not finding horses proves it's false. It's not symmetric.
Oh, yes. And I think we talked about that. Maybe it was Colby and I talked about it on the last RFM about the Light on Truth letter.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's a very, very important principle to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's not symmetric.
Right. And so are you saying that right now, as far as these invasive species goes, that's certainly a falsifiable claim? Do you believe it's been falsified about the Book of Mormon?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't think there's any evidence to support the massive influx of invasive species at the time that lines up in the timeline with the Book of Mormon. I mean, humans were an invasive species. We are the best example of an invasive species. And you don't find, Simon Southerton did an excellent job summarizing all the data, the DNA data, showing that no, humans came over the Beringina. They didn't come from the Middle East.
Over the Bering Strait, the Bering.
Yeah, they didn't come from the Middle East. And that's been basically proven. I mean, to the extent that science ever proves anything.
Is that how you say it, Beringia?
That's how I would, but I've never heard anybody pronounce it, so I probably.
Neither have I. So I was wondering.
Yeah. So the point I wanted to make here is that the Bering Land Bridge, that theory has been around for a long time. It was around before the Book of Mormon was written in science. It's been around for a very long time. I remember when I first read the first papers saying that the theory had been validated by DNA studies, thinking, well, that theory was already pretty well established with a lot of other evidence. And so it's nice to see that the DNA lines up with it. It wasn't like the DNA came out of left field and nobody was expecting the answer they got from the DNA. The human DNA studies showing that the ancient Americans came across the Bering the land bridge up there by Alaska, that theory had been around for many, many, many years. I can remember being taught that theory in high school, and I can remember my parents telling me that theory was bunk because the Book of Mormon said they came from Jerusalem.
Well, there you go.
So I don't want to downplay how important the DNA stuff is, but that's extremely important. But I also don't want people to lose sight of the fact that this theory has been around for a long time, and it's been buttressed by all kinds of evidence, including, I've got them listed here. There's linguistic evidence, there's dental genetic evidence, there's corpulites. Corpulites are poop.
Fumets.
Yeah, so this is how science works. Science works
and
by
blood tests, by the way, blood types.
Yeah, and blood types. Science works by gathering all of the data, looking at all of the evidence, and putting together a comprehensive theory that includes everything. And apologists works by helter-skelter, willy-nilly, picking and choosing and looking at things through a straw and trying to come up with any wackadoodle explanation for how to squirm out of the current predicament.
Right. And frequently the technique they use here will be contradictory to the technique they use over against this issue. Exactly. By the way, I was looking it up. I looked it up on two websites. I think the emphasis is on the second syllable. It's on the N. Beringia.
Oh, okay. Beringia.
Beringia.
I learned something new tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Say it with me now, everybody. Beringia.
Beringia.
Are we ready for the next slide?
Okay.
Yes? Okay.
I think we're getting close to the end.
I'm sorry, what?
I think we're getting close to the end.
We are.
So the Bering Land Bridge, that's a scientific theory. The Book of Mormon, it's a falsified hypothesis.
Because It was never a theory to begin with.
It was never a theory to begin with.
It was only a hypothesis.
And
it never grew up to be a theory because it got strangled in the crib.
That's right. It never made it out of the hypothesis stage. Miscarriage.
All right. Science and Mormonism. You call it an irreconcilable differences.
Yeah, I'm calling it. That's what I say. I'd be happy to be corrected if somebody can give me a coherent, logical, rational explanation of how all these problems get resolved.
Well, you know something? It's really hard to find an apologist. You can find them everywhere on the internet and on the YouTube. They have their own channels, but it's
Yeah.
really hard to find one of them on this show, in spite of the fact we've invited them all the time and they just say no.
I've heard you invite them.
There's a special exception for Jacob Hansen because we don't want him on the show. We won't have him on the show. We have a no douchebag policy.
Oh,
but
I'm glad.
I'm glad I made it. Other apologist is okay. Yeah, you're good. We've allowed you. We have a low bar.
Okay. Yes, you do. All right. So science and Mormonism, just like they're oil and water. They don't fit. You can see the bridge is broken.
This is AI, right?
AI did that. Yes.
Okay.
I said to AI, draw a picture of a bridge symbolically showing the relationship between science and Mormonism, and that's what it drew.
Wow, because the bridge, the broken part looks funky, but everything else, maybe there's too much replication, but it's just amazing to me.
Yeah, I love AI.
Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about on this slide?
No, done here. And I think we are getting close. I just wanted to tell people this is me just saying why I think science matters. I really do. It makes me feel bad sometimes when I see society drifting in ways that I think is opposing science. There's an interesting bit of information regarding false information and things like that. I heard John DeLynn bring it up one time, and I wanted to comment. I didn't, but it's pretty well known that college grads have pretty much the same susceptibility to false information as non-college grads. So a college degree doesn't necessarily protect you from bogus information, fake news, I guess. But that same study, and I have it hyperlinked here, that same study also found that scientific reasoning ability is a strong predictor of correctly identifying misinformation. So the advice I would give to people is to try and think like a scientist. And by that, I mean, adopt the epistemology of science. And most of all, just learn to be critical.
Yeah.
Sometimes I personally get feedback saying, Dwayne, you're too critical. And it's like, well, that's just my training as a scientist. I don't mean to be rude, but when it comes to ideas, I'm pretty ruthless. Ideas don't have civil rights. I feel like I have a perfect right to beat them up and chew them up and spit them out. And that's how I find out which ideas are actually good and which ideas aren't.
You know, this reminds me of one of my favorite stories about my dad. It involved me. It involved me failing in physics in high school, and my dad being a rocket scientist, an engineer who went into rocket science. It got so bad, I finally went to him for help. I had never gone to my dad for help, and there's a reason. Okay? Yeah. Just because he was very willing. It's just he's not the most gifted teacher in the world. Anyway, but I got to the end of my rope, went to him, said, can you help, please? So we sat around the kitchen table and we spent some hours, and he's trying to show me in ways that were not clear to me at all. And I was just getting more and more frustrated. And I'm sure he was getting more and more frustrated. And finally, I cry out with that cry that so many students have said, why do I have to learn this? I am never going to have to use physics in the real world. And it's my dad's reply that I will always remember. What he said to me was, he said, you're probably right. You're not going to go into anything physics related, but that's not the point. This is teaching you how to think.
Yeah. Boom. I like your dad.
And I didn't have a smart aleck response to that.
Yeah.
But I always remembered it.
Yeah.
I got a C. I made it through barely.
Well, good.
C minus.
Yeah. Your dad, that's a good point. It's learning how to think. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go to the next slide.
I think this is the last.
Oh, a shield. Right. Because the last one had the shield.
There's one more.
One more. Excuse me. There?
Yeah.
Or do you want to go to the one before that?
So, no, this is the last slide. Oh, yeah, it is critical thinking a shield. Yeah. So
Because there is a shield there, right?
yeah, and then the next one's the last slide. So this is one, I put this up because of a personal experience that I had with a member of the Mormon Church. And this person told me that their 401k, they thought of their 401k as just fun money, and it was only 10%. And I thought to myself, only 10%. He clearly hasn't done the math. So I did the math, and you can see here that even on, that's not an exorbitant salary, with a 401k match and a modest return and expecting annual raises, your 401k after 35 years can easily be $1 million or more. So this is the money the Mormon Church is stealing from you. And I will put it bluntly, tithing is theft. This money is coming out of your pocket. And 10% is a huge number. And it seems like a small number. And I've heard Mormons say, oh, it's only 10%. I get to keep 90. But that 10% is an absolutely huge number. And if you invested it, you would have a good chunk of money. But they're taking the 10% and they're investing it. And that money is now theirs. And so this is just a small example, I think, of how thinking critically can pay off in your personal finances. For me, doing the calculation, which is actually pretty simple, it's not a complicated calculation, but it was just second fiddle to me. I had done the calculation before I left the Mormon Church. I knew how much it was costing me. But this person, this Mormon that I'd been talking to, had never bothered to do the calculation. And so they didn't know. So learning to be skeptical, learning to be inquisitive, doing the math. Don't let people bully you into just silence. If you disagree, keep pushing back. And it can pay off in your actual life. It has dividends beyond just thinking. This is not just an intellectual activity. This is real life, and it has real consequences. There are Mormons out there who are getting ready to retire, who are going to be much, much poorer than they needed to be because they paid their money to the Mormon Church.
Or on the other hand, if you were super righteous like me, which I hope you were, Dwayne, and I hope everybody out there was, when you're super righteous like me and you pay your 10% off the top, and then on top of that, you get divorced not once, but twice, you find yourself in the position where you're never going to retire.
Yeah. I mean,
Laura, is Laura still there?
Laura's laughing. Yeah. And, the first thing I did when I came home and told Laura I didn't believe in the church anymore, I says, I'll go to church with you and I won't try and convert the kids, but we're not paying another dime in tithing. Because I'd done this calculation before I left the Mormon Church, and I knew how much it was costing us.
How did you feel when that SEC scandal broke in February, I think it was, of 2023?
I thought to myself, I'm so glad I didn't pay tithing after 1988.
Yeah.
That's what
we
I
could
was
have been on one of those lawsuits that's getting dismissed everywhere.
Yeah. Now the great thing about religion, and I think it's a working hypothesis for me, is that Joseph Smith decided to go into religion because he had a couple of really close calls when he was doing treasure digging, and he realized that, hey, I need to stop doing this and move over into this other area because fraud is legal if you're a religion.
Right. Oh, by the way, when I'm talking about never being able to retire, I'm supposed to couple that with a solicitation of everybody out there who's watching. Thank you so much for all of you who've made a donation to Mormonism Live. If you haven't, could I prevail upon you?
Yeah,
Dwayne, I'm asking for money right now.
Yeah, and if I'm looking over at Laura, we had talked about this, and she is making
you're talking about giving me money.
Okay. We are giving you money.
Oh, thank you.
And the reason we're doing that is because I believe a lot in what you're doing. It's not a lot of money, but it's a little bit. but I really believe in what you're doing. I think you're smart. I think that you do a tremendous good in the world by helping people, escape this institution. It's not an easy thing to escape Mormonism, not because it's intellectually difficult, but because Mormonism, you know why they have so much emphasis on the family? Because the family is their tentacles. I had the hardest time leaving Mormonism, partly because I knew how it would affect my mother and father. Mormonism knows that there's no better way to retain members than to make family relationships contingent on everybody being members of the church. And that's it makes it so hard to leave. And I really, honestly, really appreciate the work that you're doing, and not just you, but all the other guys, especially you. Yeah, especially you. But there's lots of really good content on the internet. And when I left Mormonism, it was just me. I did not know another person on the planet except my Uncle Marlowe who'd left Mormonism. And so I think you guys are doing a great job, and I hope that everybody that's listening will pony up for the service that you provide.
Thank you so much. And the way you do that is to go to mormonismlive.com. It's radiofreemormon.org. I think it's mormonismlive.com. It could be org. I'm terrible at this. Have you noticed? Bill does all the solicitations. But find it, go there, click the donate button, and join Dwayne and his lovely wife, Laura, in making a donation to Mormonism Live. You'll be glad you did. Thank you so much for that, Dwayne. I appreciate the personal testimonial, though you said you're not into that much as a scientist.
Well, this isn't science. This is just me saying, I want to help you out. That's not science.
Well, thank you. And you're helping me out here tonight.
By the way, if people just go to Google and type in how do I contribute to Radio Free Mormon, it takes you right to the right page.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. How do I contribute? I just went on Google and I said, how do I contribute to Radio Free Mormon? And boom, there I was.
Holy Toledo. By the way, we want to give a notice to I don't know how to do all these things, and I apologize, everybody. Let's see, there's Guy McDude. He says he gives us a super chat. He says, scientific test to see if money will this give me the edge I need to be top yapper. Well, we got your thing up there, your message up there. And then there's a super sticker. When $5 is not enough, Guy likes to send an additional $1.49. Thank you, Guy McDude. We really appreciate it. I'm going to go over here to the other part of the live chat. If anybody has any questions right now for our guest, Dwayne Anderson, author of the book Farewell to Eden, please ask them now. Please put them in all caps. I'm monitoring the live chat now. I've just started. I have not before. So if you put it before, there's only like 6 messages that show up over here on the right of my screen. I won't be able to see anything that was before that. I suppose I could scroll a little bit. If the Spirit moves me, I'm not seeing anything written in all caps. Tonight only, writing in all caps will not be considered rude or insubordinate. So I'm going to give him a second to do that. We're already at 2 hours and 17. Oh, is the book still? Hang on a second here. Look at this. Here we go. A. Ross says, is the book still available? That's a good question. Please answer.
Yeah, I'm sorry, folks, but part of my deconstructing was I decided to unpublish it. It's not. It's you can buy used copies on Amazon, but it's no longer being published.
Okay, but we could go to Amazon and get a used copy.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Ray wants to know, is evolution proven? Is that a trick question, do you think?
No, I don't think it's a trick question, and I think it's a fair question. Okay. And the short answer is yes. And the follow-up to that is that in science, nothing is ever proven with 100% certainty. We're always open in science to revising our theories if the facts demand it. But in science also sets a pretty high bar, and most people would consider that bar high enough to qualify for proof.
Now, in the law, we talk about all sorts of different standards of proof. And when you're saying it's proven, but it's not proven 100%, You must mean something between 50 and 100%, right? Because if it weren't at least 50, you wouldn't call it proven, would you?
No, I mean something between 99.9 and 100.
Oh, we're talking about like 4 arc seconds here.
Yeah, I mean, scientists are a skeptical bunch, and they're not willing to call it a fact until, by golly, it's really proven fact.
So this is actually more than proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Oh, way more, way more. So to give you an example, the Large Hadron Collider, they set their standard of proof at 6 sigma. Now that's a mathematical term, but 6 sigma is something like more than 99.999. Your average person has no idea how strict the requirements are in science before something is accepted as an accepted theory. It's a very high bar.
Okay. So when you say proven, you're talking about I'm trying to say a finitude, a fineness to your measurement that we don't deal with in the law.
Yeah.
We just send guys to the electric chair.
Right, sure.
I'm proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but you're not convinced until
10 out of 11, off to the chair you go.
Exactly.
Well, I do want to make one, I do want to add one more thing though. So remember I had the slide on evolution. Evolution can mean the fact of evolution. It can also mean the theory of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Now, scientists would probably say, yeah, there's a pretty good chance we're going to have to tweak the theory of evolution. But they're very unlikely to say, oops, our bad, things don't evolve at all.
Right.
Evolution is a fact. I mean, you can observe it in a petri dish. You can observe it in the wild. The fact that species evolve is considered a fact in science. But the theory of evolution has and will probably continue to undergo modifications.
Are you planning a new book?
No, I'm planning a new hike though.
You were on this massive hike yesterday. I couldn't get a hold of you. You were heaven knows where. You got up at 3:00 in the morning it wasn't Memorial Day. It was the day after, but it's all the same to you because you're retired.
Yeah, I'm retired.
But you got up at 3 a.m. That's the critical part, to go hiking.
Yeah. You know, writing a book it's a big effort. I think if a publisher came along and said, here's an editor, we want to publish your book, would you help us? Then I would probably say, yeah, but the reality is I don't have that many years left to live, and I'm gonna spend them doing things besides Mormonism. Sorry,
I'm not, and you know why? Because I was faithful, I was righteous in my tithe paying.
Yeah, well.
Meg Monzuka says, this has been so fantastic. Thank you. If I hadn't been a Mormon woman, and this is a bit of a sad postscript to the show. If I hadn't been a Mormon woman, I would have pursued the hard sciences. But alas, I'm a stay-at-home mom, which is a science in itself, LOL. So she's got a good attitude about it, but still it seems to sting. And I know it does for a lot of people.
And I think science lost out. I'm sorry to hear that, Meg.
Yeah. Guy McDude, we're going to give him another shot since he's the only one who's done super chats to the show. Guy McDude says, just because we can't imagine a test to falsify Mormon God, does that mean that Mormon God is unfalsifiable until a test to falsify is determined? How can we know a claim is unfalsifiable? Well,
that's actually a really good question, and I appreciate that, Guy. So first of all, it's usually on the person who's offering the hypothesis to tell you how to falsify it. So, Mormons that's on Mormons. Mormons need to tell me how to falsify their God. And then we'll see what kind of test they give. That makes sense?
Yeah, and I think that if I'm understanding what you had said originally, Dwayne, one of the ways in which you feel that Mormonism has falsified God is when Joseph Smith decided to define God as a being of like you and me, physical body, flesh and bones, therefore with his brain, and the brain is what's handling everything, apparently, and it would burn itself out, handling everything in the universe. So maybe that's one way?
Yeah, it would burn itself out just trying to know everything about the Earth, let alone the solar system or the galaxy or the universe.
Yeah, but we can
It's
look
not
up
even
down
close.
into the earth. It's going to be a huge Urim and Thummim to everybody who inherits the celestial kingdom. We can look
Great.
down into the earth and we can see everything. All we have
Yeah,
to do is look.
now it's unfalsifiable, and I do think Mormonism is going to go that way. I mean, they don't really have a choice, do they?
No, and they have a track record now. And Bill and I have been watching this for years now as they go from point to point to point. Revelation in the Mormon Church used to be a game of addition with Joseph Smith, and then Brigham Young tried and was soundly rejected pretty much.
That didn't work.
No, but after that, Revelation has been a consistent game of subtraction.
Yeah.
There are fewer and fewer things that we know that we used to know in the Mormon Church. And I think that's part and parcel of this game of making everything unfalsifiable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think everybody else is done. I don't see any more questions in all caps. I'm going to switch out of there, everybody. Thanks a lot for your questions, everybody. And that's gone. And now all that's left is for us to say goodnight. Dwayne, thank you so much for joining us. Laura, thank you for monitoring Dwayne so that he didn't get in any trouble at all. Okay.
I wouldn't go so that far.
Obviously, Laura doesn't trust me because I was supposed to be your chaperone.
Yeah.
But thank you for being here. Thanks for everything you've contributed. Thanks for your book. Once again, go to Amazon. Maybe you can score a used copy if you act quickly, because there's going to be a lot of people watching this and probably a lot of people interested in reading this book. Thanks again. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And let me go here to my media assets, because as soon as I'm done, by the way, that's assets, media assets. I have to put this up on the right side of the screen so I know where to click at the time that we're going to be heading out of the show. Now, I've told you everything. All the magic's gone. You've seen behind the curtain. So thanks, everybody, for joining us here on Mormonism Live. Friday, I think Bill will be back. I think we're going to have Mormonism After Dark at its regularly scheduled time at 8 o'clock on Friday. And if not, then I'll be here. Okay. I tell you what, I'll make you that promise. I'll be here, and I hope that Bill will be too. And I hope you'll join us. So thanks. And if you can't, then join us next week for another episode of Mormonism Live. Good night, everybody.